The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everybody. This is the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. If you're not familiar with the Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence. It's our 20th year anniversary, which is incredibly cool. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years. It's also hard to believe that this is the end of the year. It's like every year that we've been doing this is episode number 64 or 63, actually. It's just amazing that we have gone this far, which is we've been talking about Agile and Agile development and how Agile has impacted everyone's lives. And when we get towards the end of the year, one of the best things that I look forward to is I get to spend some time with a very talented group of people and talking about Agile and Agile practices. And this is a subgroup within the Agile Alliance. It's called the Supporting Agile Adoption Work Group. It gets together most of the time in person, and we've been visiting anything from ING Bank to Spotify to Ericsson to just going in. And if you're familiar with the lean concept of going to the Gemba and seeing where the work happens, we've been doing that for the last decade. And decades is a fun word to go throw into the mix as well. But for the last 10 years, we've been getting together and talking about, if you think about what is mainstream in Agile, we've been talking about sort of the things that are coming in or the things that are impacting Agile and Agile teams. Most of the people that are a part of the Supporting Agile Adoption Work Group are people who are practitioners that are working in the trenches. And some of the things that are top of mind for them are the things that are probably top of mind to you as well. For this year, there was anything from the topics of fit for purpose, which we've talked about a little bit on the Agile Coaching Network. We've talked about the future of Agile, hybrid work, which is probably top of mind for everyone as we're coming into 2022, sustainability, the ethics of Agile, to what bad Agile is, and anything from how small changes within organizations bubble up in order to create new governance and new ways of actually working. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and just turn over the mic to the people in the room here and have them go and just give a brief introduction of who they are and what they love about being a part of this work group. Jens, do you want to kick us off?
My name is Jens Koldewey. I'm a little bit more than 20 years in the Agile community. So I've started, I think, a few months after Jutta has started back in the 90s. And today I'm more engaged in the, kind of challenging job to try to transform large organizations. And a Scrum trainer, Kanban trainer. And what I love about this group is actually the different views to that and the insights we have whenever we have a conversation starting from 10 minutes to a full weekend.
Yeah, I'm Hendrik. So those of you that are participating in the Agile Coaching Network know me already because I'm there most of the time. And it's a great pleasure. And another great pleasure is that I'm part of this wonderful team, the Supporting Agile Adoption Group. And I manage our special projects at Ericsson. I'm used to large-scale environments, international companies, and so on. And I'm a transformation expert. Yeah, and what I love about this group is a bit like what Jens was saying, the diversity of thought, the diversity of perspectives, and the crazily interesting topics that always come up. So this group is never boring, and I have over the years learned so many things from the people here. And I'm trying to also give, of course, all the time. So some of the stuff that we have been discussing here also ended up in the Agile Coaching Network calls. So it's all in one family, I would say.
I'm Jorgen Hesselberg. I'm an author of Unlocking Agility and co-founder of Comparative Agility. And I've been in the Agile world now, so to speak, since 2006, 2007. I think I sort of did Agile stuff before that, but didn't think about as that. It was just a natural way of working. Yeah, I've been one of those people who have been working to find ways of being more agile in large organizations. That's sort of been my sort of introduction into the agile world. And I think actually Ray and I met in, I think it's 2011 now. So about 10 years ago, we met just as we were getting ready to meet for the first time as a group. So that was a really cool moment. And since then, I've been part of this group, and it's been it's really amazing. One thing that I love about this group is that it is it's a very safe space, not like sort of like, yeah, people always say that it's a safe space, but truly you can talk about anything here, and it's a very intellectually challenging place. I think we can push boundaries, and we talk about topics that sometimes don't make any sense at all, but sometimes they all come together at the end. So one of the things we talked about this time was that birds weren't real, and you may wonder what does that got to do with Agile, but it sort of at the end of the day had something to do with it anyway. So yeah, very proud to be part of this group. Can't believe it's been 10 years now, but excited to be here and excited for another 10 years.
Hi, everyone. I am also, like Henrik, a frequent flyer on the Agile Coaching Network. I'm not there every month, but I'm there a lot of times, so some of you will be familiar with me. My role has been in the Agile community, started in the late 90s, very late 90s, so after Jutta and Jens. But my role has been as a contributor and an initiator, I would say, in the Strengths Finder, I guess, activator. I was one of the founders of this group, and that has been, watching it grow and contribute as a group over the years has been a real pleasure for me. I've also written a number of books in the Agile space. Some of you will find my name familiar in that way. And now I am a co-founder of something called the Agile Fluency Project, which moves away from thinking about Agile as being an only one way to do it kind of thing, and get more nuance into our practice. And so to find me, you go to the Agile Fluency Project and click on any button that says contact us, and I'm easily findable there and on LinkedIn. And I will pass it.
Hey, Marcin Florian here, speaking to you from somewhat wintry and definitely dark Stockholm. I've a little bit like Jürgen, I've been doing stuff with software since late 90s and had no idea that some of the ways of working that I preferred then got to be called Agile. And of course, as soon as I learned that, I've really embraced that way of working and that way of thinking, and have been able to discover an amazing community of people who really thought about how can we make this world of writing software better for everyone and better for the outcomes and the people who are doing it. For the last 6 and a bit years, I've been working at this big green company called Spotify, and done lots of different jobs, which is one of the fun things about being at an organization like this. So for the last 6 months, I have been in a role called TechOps Lead, which is looking at the 800 plus people organization, trying to understand the system of work and trying to understand what ways of working and what ways of interacting and thinking can help us improve the experience, both for the developers, but for also the outcomes that we generate. And like many people already mentioned, this group is amazing in terms of catalyzing ideas and sharing thoughts and really being an inspiration. So I look towards this meeting every year, and I hope we can give back a little bit to the community in our conversation.
My name is Daria Schmidt, and I'm a newcomer to the group. I got invited for the first time last year, and I couldn't make it for private reasons. And there are communities where when you say no once, you are never invited again. Surprisingly, this is not the group like that, and I was very happy to get involved here for the last 2 days. I spent a great time talking about very interesting topics. Myself, I'm a researcher. I'm a professor at the Blekinge Institute of Technology in the dark Sweden. In winter, it is quite dark and cold. And I'm an expert in distributed development and global software development. And like 15 years ago, people would ask what agile, can it be agile when it is large and distributed? Well, in fact, it can. And for the last 10 years, we were trying to show how agile can be implemented across time and space. I've authored a couple of books on this topic, and I work with companies like Ericsson, Spotify, ABB, and a number of smaller, maybe less known companies to the world. And we are studying teams, studying autonomy, organizational decentralization, organizational culture, and so on and so forth. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
My name is Jutta Eckstein. I am from Germany, and it seems now everyone kind of said that they came after me into the Agile space, which makes me really feel old. I don't know. So I learned about extreme programming, I think it was in '97, and so I worked in the Agile space as a programmer, but also then in architecture and design and leading teams and teams of teams. And speaking of large and global, so I wrote also the very first book on Agile in the Large, which was published in 2004. I also actually contributed to Darja's book, which is also some time ago. And I wrote a couple of other books. One of them, the latest one, is the Bossa Nova book. So it's about company-wide agility, which also brings me to a point I wanted to make, because we also miss some people here in the group. We were actually a few more than who are there now. And one of them, John Buck, is my co-author on that book. Another one contributed a lot because Bossa Nova stands also for Beyond Budgeting. So Bjarten Bognes is a person who is always a great contributor to this group. And then last but not least, Eric Abelen from ING. He actually, by the way, also contributed to the Bossa Nova book by sharing his experiences, what they're doing within ING on company-wide agility aspects. And yeah, I'm every year really super happy to be here, and having those really intense, deep conversations is just a wonderful thing. So yeah, looking forward to this always. And then there's Ray.
So the beautiful thing about all of this is that there is 10 years worth of information that's available up on the Agile Alliance website. And anything from articles to other podcasts that we've done in the past years, and just a wealth of opportunity for you to actually tune in and look at those prior conversations that we had. I think we even did, when we were over at ING Bank, we recorded and looked at their business environment and did a campus review, and we videotaped that. So that's all available for you to just go and look at and absorb. And since this, is an all volunteer army of people who are very passionate about the subject, any of them, I know that as well as most of the Agile community, is very open to, if you have questions, to just reach out to us, and we're always willing to go offer our voice to all of this. So, I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff coming into this, 2 packed days, and I always walk away at the end of each of these days and think to myself, I feel exhausted, but I also feel re-energized for my 2022 now, because I mean, there's a lot of things that are crossing over into that space, and I really would like to hear from what we would like to explore, at least for this podcast. I mean, we had a lot of different subjects with a lot of different passionable topics. What do you guys want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the fit for purpose? Do you want to talk about the ethics? Do you want to talk about sustainability? What do you want to talk about?
I think one thing would be interesting if Daria, with her research background, talks a little bit about her research results in the hybrid workspace, because this has been a topic that was burning quite hot in the Agile Coaching Network, and having a professor here among us who has researched this and who has data, that's a unique opportunity. So I would love to hear from you, Daria.
I always wondered, what are the expectations from me? And now you throw me into the podcast to start with.
You're
All
always
right,
welcome.
I can take this. Yes, so where do I start? I think we started in March, April 2020 with the first question that we asked our companies, collaborating companies. Are people going to be productive? And are they in fact productive? And software engineering is not a good field to ask this question because we can't really measure what the productivity is. All right, but we started with at least something. We looked at code production, and we saw that on average things didn't change. Although when we zoomed into the average, we saw that behind the average no change, we saw that there are people who are less productive than working in the office, and there are people who are more productive and much more productive than working in the office. So that was our first revelation. Then after checking the code, we also asked people, and recently, during this weekend actually, I have resubmitted the revision of an article that summarizes 13 different surveys of perceived productivity during the pandemic, comparing the perceived productivity of engineers with the pre-pandemic times. And the findings is, it is basically the same story. Behind the average, no change. There are people to the left from the normal and to the right from the norm. But I think what's more interesting during the last 2 years, that the stigmatization of working from home has disappeared, and more people, often to their surprise, have found that they will remain working from home at least parts of the week. And the most recent research that we're conducting at the moment is the evidence from 16 companies, and some of them are represented by different multinational sites, that people want flexibility. And that is one of the topics that went as an input into the discussion in this group. So what does that mean? And I guess some of you would like to maybe reflect on this.
I think flexibility is the big thing, because we don't know, no company I think really knows how the future will look like. I mean, we have the pre-COVID times. We were not used to these hybrid setups or remote setups. Now we learned something new, and some people think like, oh, we are already in the new normal, but it's not the new normal. There will be yet another new normal coming up after, hopefully, the pandemic is over, and we just don't know how that will exactly look. But as you said, that's something we can see in our company, is that people want to have the flexibility. And how to now, from a company perspective, from a leadership and management perspective, organize that flexibility. That's a complex endeavor, because especially when you're a multinational company, there is different rules, regulations, work regulations in different countries, and there is a lot of stuff going on, at least at Ericsson at the moment, in the different countries, negotiations with unions, what does the government say, and so on. And this is a journey. That's what we are embracing. So we understand, yes, we need to be flexible. We now say on a high level, there will be a 50-50 thing. So you will work probably in average over the whole company. People will work 50% from home and 50% in the company. But then it's a one-on-one discussion for every individual. Yeah, how to do this. I mean, because it's personal preferences, is what is the team's needs, what is the business need, what are the rules and regulations in the country that have to be taken into consideration when determining this. So that's where we are.
Apart from the sorry, Jens, go ahead.
I'd be interested, Daria, if you say software development, it has at least 4 different levels. One is understanding what to do. The next is deciding how to do that. Third one is actually do it. And the fourth one is usually forgotten, which is check whether you did that, also known as testing. And I would expect that home office does not really interfere with doing it and checking that. But deciding what to do and deciding how to do that needs a lot of interaction, open communication. Have you seen any evidence that this has changed during the pandemic?
Yes, we have collected a lot of different anecdotes. At the moment, they are anecdotes, really, because they are in the interview recordings. And of course, what we see is when the teams need to decide on something new, not discussed before, and they go into a brainstorming discussion. Many teams have said that in order to make that efficient, they need to prepare. So they actually prepare a draft idea for discussion, and that kills the whole purpose with the brainstorming. This means that you reduce your space of creativity to discussing one idea. And that obviously will have quite a lot of consequences on the creativity and maybe the decisions as such.
We talk about hybrid teams or remote teams as if COVID started them. And what's interesting to me is that when we get to whatever new normal looks like, I think the lessons from the teams that were working distributed and remote before COVID are going to be valuable to, you know, everyone who's continuing this experiment, right? And because there were a lot of lessons learned before of teams that were not co-located and working, and Jutta wrote a book about it, Agile Software Development and Distributed Teams, and some other folks have written books about it since then. And there are, I mean, I think that's going to be a rich source of people to dive into the empirical evidence and pair that with the research evidence that Daria and her group are putting together, and being able to sort of make selections about what's going to be the best for our workplace.
Yeah, I agree that there is a lot of experience out there which has been there before the pandemic. However, what has really changed is now with the pandemic, it's all satellites that we're having, where before we had like smaller groups or bigger groups being at different locations, but now everyone sits by themselves, which is a huge difference. And with that, I also thought when Hendrik, you were saying like, well, we are all on this journey, it sounded a lot like this was more from the corporate perspective, and maybe that's not true. Yet the journey, I think we still are on, and the many questions we haven't answered yet are the ones also for the individuals. And what I mainly mean with that is the huge topic of self-care, because it seems so difficult for people to decide when is work starting and ending, and it's all kind of, yeah, well, being available all the time. And that's me saying that where this is my life forever, or it feels like forever, because I'm independent and this is what I love to do. However, it also took me some time to find a good way how I do that. And it seems this is a really new challenge for a lot of people, and there are not a lot of good answers for that, I think.
I remember when we first started talking about the pandemic, I was thinking, oh, we shouldn't mention the pandemic because it'll sound dated very quickly. In 3 months, this thing will be over. So we will just laugh over here. But here we are, you know, a year or two into this, and it's still there. And there probably will be some form of it going on. What I think is fascinating about this is, yes, this is not new, but it's just the scale, of course, is new. Not everyone now has to deal with this, and that scale forces changes that I think have been really interesting. I think it has changed the tools we work with. I think a lot of the tools that we use now, you know, Miro and Mural and Zoom and all those others, they existed before, but I think that they have certainly been augmented and enhanced and been used in ways we didn't do before. And I very often see, for instance, I read a tweet the other day of a person who had an offline class. We actually had a class in person, and he said, I'm setting up this room and I'm realizing now how inefficient this is and how difficult it is, because now only 2 people can put ideas on the board at the same time. And I'm seeing all these constraints that real life has. which was interesting. I've always kind of felt like, okay, we have the constraints of online world. Now he was kind of pointing out the other thing. And the other thing that really struck me is that the architecture of the physical space is changing also. I was visiting a business school the other day, and I've seen now that they're actually implementing sort of one-person pods to a much greater degree than what they did before. And I was thinking, that's so strange. You know, we want to encourage teamwork and things like that. And what they were saying is that a lot of the students are actually working with other students in other countries, and they prefer a one-person pod where they can actually sit down, have their environment, and then just have a really great engaging conversation with that person from another place without bothering others. So the physical environment is also changing. So I don't know, it's really fascinating, but I think hybrid is sort of the key here. It's not going to be one or the other. Maybe it just opens up more possibilities for us to find what works in a given context.
I think one big topic that was mentioned already before was also the work-life balance and the stress level that we have seen going up in many companies. In our company, definitely we can see that the stress level is going up. And one term that I'm using is the disembodied workplace. So you're meeting people, somehow you have so much social connection, and then you don't have social connection because you're not in the same room with people anymore. And we pay a toll for this. That's becoming more and more obvious. We have in our company, for example, young people who do not yet have a family. They're in the best, they come out of university, they start at a company, they're like, and now they are sitting at home alone, totally alone. All they have is a screen and a lot of faces in front of them. And I think this is a big challenge for especially people who live alone, that they don't have social or physical connections anymore. So there are a number of challenges that we need to be aware of and that need to be taken care of also when we now move into the future. How do we get this back? And in connection to that, one big discussion is how do you keep a company culture up if you're not meeting people? So what I've seen is I have recruited and onboarded a number of people freshly into the company and into my team during the last 2 years. And it's a challenge. I mean, when people have never met their colleagues, how do they feel what this company is about? And I feel like as long as they come into an intact team that knows the company culture and lives the company culture, it's working okay-ish. But the longer the situation persists, the more I think we start losing.
I think we have to really think deliberately about this onboarding experience. So I've actually had an opportunity to build this small team from scratch, and it definitely takes much more time, and it requires me to be much more deliberate about the onboarding experience. So I know that my team has really benefited from a company-wide, very deliberate onboarding program that has moved from being face-to-face to, of course, online in the last 2 years, but still happens. And we're investing a lot of time in people meeting others who are joining the company, but also meeting the people who've been at the company for a long time, spending some time with the whole leadership team of the company, to be able to really feel and get some exposure to that kind of culture, behaviors, norms, assumptions that we have in the organization. So I think that, we have to be much more deliberate about how we onboard and bring people into the organization.
I'm kind of curious because your company in particular was formed in a team environment and very much from an Agile perspective, embracing a lot of the Agile patterns of let's get a group of 12 together. Even your offices were constructed so that teams had team rooms and other structures so that they can have that collaboration itself. And so I'm sort of curious on the impact of now going more towards hybrid. And I know you guys have been growing as an organization and suffering through some of the big company angst of, well, I can't get everyone in a room anyway. But I'm just kind of curious, how has that affected your culture?
I think it's quite early to say, actually. We've definitely changed the approach to how we want to continue growing the organization. We've created this program that we call Work From Anywhere, where we basically acknowledge that we have to start growing the organization globally and allow people from much more diverse backgrounds and locations to work together. So something that Jürgen mentioned before, we also seeing that the architecture and the layout of the office, the physical space is changing, and more of like these team rooms that you mentioned are now turning into collaboration spaces. But we also have more of those, one-to-one pods, small rooms where you can have a meeting with people who are in the office and distribute it in another country, maybe. I'm very curious to see how the culture will change. But I really hope that we keep take advantage of the new tools that surface right now and continue with the collaboration, because, and Diana made a very good point here, there's been teams for years that have found ways to collaborate, do ensemble programming online, and that can really work.
Right. I've never had the luxury of having all of my team members in the same room. I mean, and this is in the late 90s and early 80s, I should say. And really the fact of, making sure that the remote person feels connected. And I mean, there was a lot of those things that we were trained early on to make sure that we level the playing field a bit. And so I'm curious in one aspect, because I had a meeting with somebody who is a proclaimed extrovert, and she said that this is just driving her nuts, and she gains her energy from people coming to her and having collaboration. And she legitimately told me she is depressed. She feels like she is not getting what she normally gets from that jazz of working with people. How is the mental health component to this and the ways that we coach and mentor people, how has that shifted because of just having to now look for these types of issues?
This is a big challenge because there's also a problem of observability now. I mean, as a coach, usually you would be running around the open space and you would see how people are talking to each other. You would see people's faces. You would get a sentiment of what's going on. And you could start talking to a person when you feel that person might be struggling. And now people are struggling and you sometimes just don't know about it. So this is one of the challenges. And that's why it's so important that people watch out for each other. And that's a thing that I see emerging now, that teams in many meetings, the starting point is really to talk about how we are doing and so on. So, and I feel like there is a cohesiveness coming now from having a bit of a social talk, checking in, seeing how are you doing, yeah, just to be with the people and capture that thing.
This is a great example, by the way, Hendrik, that has also been learned before the pandemic. If you work with distributed teams, this is how you start almost every meeting in order to bring people really together and connect them. However, what I also thought hearing this, and I have heard this as well from people saying like, well, this is depressing, not seeing people and not interacting in person with people, and I also have some colleagues and friends who really suffer from that. And my hope is this makes us all more aware that there is also the other way around true for all the people who are introverts and who always suffered from the super collaborative space where they never felt like this gives me energy. It's just the opposite. It drains energy. And so I guess my hope is for almost everything we go through that we learn something from it and do then something with it. And Martin, sorry, I think I interrupted.
I think Diana had a reflection to follow up, and then I'm.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think not only the introvert-extrovert continuum, but also abilities and disabilities. In some ways, working from home has been, what I have heard is that in some ways, working from home has been so much more fulfilling and convenient and enriching for folks who don't get around as easily as those of us who are, I love the term, temporarily abled. It's inevitable for all of us that at some point, at least some point in our life, we are going to have that experience. And even if it's tripping over a sidewalk, which I've done a couple of times. So, you know, I think that keeping in mind, I think it's a huge point at Jutta, the keeping in mind the range of not only psychological or work preferences, but also physical preferences, but also healthcare preferences, childcare preferences, family preferences. I mean, there's a whole range of things to be considered here. And Marcin, I'll bump it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah, I just wanted to amplify a little bit what Henrik said as well, like the importance of talking about mental health. You know, we've had a program at our company called Heart and Soul. We've really amplified and increased activities in there. We now have, so I bet every company for a very long time working in a physical space had first aiders, people who are trained to give, you know, CPR when someone faints. But now we actually started having mental first aiders, people who can actually look for signs of mental problems and give that first aid support and identify when people need to be connected with a specialist or a professional to really give further help. I think what we really need to do is give people more tools now around this recognition of mental health challenges and tools for things like self-leadership, you know, like recognizing what state am I in and how can I help myself, or how can I, or when should I go and reach for help? And one more reflection that I wanted to share was we talked earlier on about this flexibility, which is great, but this flexibility creates, of course, new constraints and new requirements. So you have to maybe start thinking about decoupling how we think about different aspects of our lives. You know, we used to think about getting into the room, having the team and having all the social interactions and all the work interactions and conversations within that team. And now maybe we're going to be on several teams, and it's going to be another team of people who maybe happen to be in the same city who will provide us with those social interactions. And there's going to be another team where we're going to be producing or doing work. Jens, what do you think?
There's one problem there. I'm completely with you, Marcin, but there's one problem I see, that people start to get overflooded with meetings in their calendar. So the moment they actually need your interaction and your interference most is when they don't have time for it. And so this is a challenge we've run into, and I don't know how to solve that yet.
Well, this harkens back again to some of the things that we had to learn before the pandemic, which is effective meetings, which was, you know, we always had a standing rule that said that the meeting ends 10 minutes before the top of the hour to give people a break. And you know, we had a campus that I used to work at in California that FM1 and FM2 were a mile away from each other, even though the numbers were sequentially. Nobody would ever think about putting a back-to-back meeting between those two because somebody would have to go run. And to Diana's point, some people couldn't run. So it's like, you know, you scheduled meetings with the mindset of let's be cognitive of people's time and making sure that we're really being good citizens. Marcin, you have something to add to that?
I think maybe we have an opportunity here to ask Daria a little bit, like, has she seen in the data any increase in the number of meetings that people are having? How is that looking?
That's a very good question. We have checked calendar invitations, and we will not discuss now whether we all are very disciplined in how we treat our calendars, because people treat them differently. We looked into the number of approved, confirmed meeting invitations, and what we can see is that the long meetings, more than 4 hours long meetings, are gone from the calendars, non-existing. So those were the work sessions, probably the workshops, the brainstorming sessions that I referred to earlier. What we can see is that the number of meetings indeed grew, but the minutes spent in meetings did not. So 60-minute meetings became 45 minutes long. 30 minutes, half-hour meetings became 25 minutes long. So there is a difference how we treat meetings as well. But to comment on what you have said about the number of meetings and booking each other, we can see that previously, do you realize that we were all quite limited by the number of meeting rooms in our companies? We are not limited by that number anymore. So there is an endless almost opportunity to book meetings. We have particularly look into managers' calendars because, you know, we have heard that managers suffer from being overbooked and having too many meetings, which did not actually prove because if we compare with the pre-pandemic times, it's actually the same. There is no change. But how we perceive this has changed. So we are more, Zoom fatigue is not a non-existing thing. It's a true phenomena. So our perception of having more meetings is now active. And also, we are booking meetings, especially when we work distributed with other countries. We tend to book more meetings in the non-usual hours. So that has become an accepted behavior. And the most funny anecdote in this respect comes from one company that the Swedes work with Indians. And Swedes were booking their Indian colleagues for meetings just because they thought they have nothing to do because of the pandemic and they have lockdown measures, so they don't have anywhere to go, so they better work.
It's kind of crazy, yeah. I think one part of the Zoom fatigue, and that's a thing that we have been discussing in our company quite a bit, is this, that there is no gaps between the meetings. You say that in the you have looked at calendars, so, and we also did, like, there is in Outlook, for example, this functionality. If you book a meeting, 1 hour meetings are just 50 minutes and half-hour meetings are 25 minutes. Okay, that's what the theory says. De facto, what happens is you have a 25-minute meeting, and then people don't finish their sentence, and those 5 minutes are gone easily. And then what happens is, okay, oh my God, the next meeting is running. So you click a button to get out of one meeting, you click the same button again to be in the next meeting. The context switch, you're in a different context, you discuss a different topic, and this is so exhausting. I have sometimes days where I have like 7, 8 half-hour meetings. The speed of context switch is very, very draining, I think. Yeah, you have something on that, Daya.
There is even worse. There are parallel meetings when somebody books themselves 2 or 3 times and actually having, for example, Microsoft Teams meeting, a Zoom meeting, and then on a phone also meeting. And then you're listening to one meeting, answering emails on your laptop, and talking to another meeting, which is absolutely worse than anything else.
That is crazy. I think, again, it sort of harkens back to some learned patterns. I mean, as a former, senior director in a company, I remember part of the ownership of making sure that didn't happen was me. It was I had to take the steps and say, tell me what the structured agenda was, when you needed me to be there, and I will be there. But I need to be, if it is just an FYI meeting, I am not going unless there is an active participation that you need from me, or a decision or something else. And I think it's true in any level of work. I think that we have to personally own our calendars and to not allow that. I mean, that's just crazy talk. And because I know that the one thing that bugs me the most is that when you're in a meeting And you can clearly see that everyone is busy and that they've got other things that they want to go off and go do. And I've stopped meetings and saying, look, clearly there's more important things that you have to do than to focus here, what we're trying to do right now. So when do we want to get back together? You know, I think it's a way that we have to be very, conscious that when we see that, we have to call that out a bit. We are right now almost approaching the top of the hour. Do we want to wrap this subject up? It seemed like we just kind of went and dug into this one because it's very top of mind for all of us. Did anyone have any final thoughts on this?
We really all need to learn what it means to take care of ourselves. And we had this topic now touched from many different areas, and it seems to be the most important for that time right now. And I hope we find better answers. And I assume the problem is that the answers will be very individual and are just related to the personal context.
Jürgen, you were starting.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, not a researcher, but I think one confounding variable here is that we're in a pandemic. So even though we're working in a distributed manner, but there's a main driver behind all of this is the pandemic, which I think affects everything else. So when we talk about mental health, yeah, I'm sure part of that is because of virtual and not meeting people and everything else. But I do think that context, that pandemic, permeates everything. So it'll be interesting when we get to a more new normal, so to speak, how that's going to change things, because it will change things. And it might be better in some ways. And just another thing that I thought was interesting is how I think a lot of the younger folks, and I talk really young folks now, like my son, he's 14, and they're in ninth grade. And one thing I thought was interesting is that they were in lockdown and they were doing these virtual meetings. And the way things have kind of been, I think, with most of the companies is that we all kind of show our faces and we have our video cameras on. That class basically told the teacher that we don't feel comfortable with that. We don't want our faces on TV or on the screen all the time. And the teacher actually said, okay, that's fine. So they just kind of set a whole new policy, and it was them deciding that, not the teacher. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like they're taking back control in a sense. And I'm hoping they could be the same thing with companies also, that the employee has a say in this, not just the employer. So anyway, it goes back to what Jutta was saying too around self-care. Do what works.
My son was actually the only one to switch on his camera. To me, the most puzzling thing is things change. So some things get better, some things get worse. I think this is what is happening all the time. And with the pandemic and the switch to hybrid mode, of course, there will be a lot of changes, but what is still open to me is the question: how do we preserve creative workshop-like? And I don't see more than proxies for that yet. We can go with that for 1 or 2 years, but not very much longer.
Build on what Jens just said. I mean, what I was sitting here thinking, particularly after you were talking about going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and how we always went from meeting to meeting to meeting, some of us, right? But they were in different rooms, in different spaces. We had that time to either run or walk and get some other kind of movement in between. And what I find that I'm getting more and more interested in, sort of linked to what Jens just said, is when do we need human solutions to our human problems? And when do we need technical solutions to our human problems? And Zoom and Teams and all of those things and Mural have provided some really amazing technical solutions. Menti is another one that I like. A lot of technical solutions to those human problems, but we have not been as effective at looking for the human solutions or the human problems that need human solutions. Like get up and move around halfway through a meeting, change your body space, do all the things that we know refresh us and make us better learners and contributors when we are working in a group. And that's what's fascinating me right now. How can we incorporate more of those kinds of things into our virtual world?
I would like to build up on that, going back to the technical solutions, actually, because I was amazed how during the pandemic times, companies have invested effort and money into mimicking, helping us mimic our tool set and equipment at home. So I have a very nice studio at home at the moment, which is paid by my employer. Now, having done that, we realize that people don't want to return to the companies. Now, the big question is, how shall we mimic what we have at home that is not present in the office to lure people back? Because I'm not a proponent of forcing people back into the office by obligatory, mandatory presence on different weekdays or proportion of the time spent in the office premises. So I think it's a bad idea. I think we should give flexibility to people, but still think creatively how to create an environment where people would like to return to.
I have a coaching bag that says on it, treat people like adults. And I think that's part of the thing that we need is that we don't hire very smart people and then want to subordinate them like our children and treat them in ways that control them. I mean, you are smart people. Own your day, and I trust you to do your work, which I think is always the thing that we all have to keep in our brains most of the time. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. It has been a wonderful year. It has been a wonderful supporting Agile adoption work group weekend, and I am definitely recharged. The next Agile Coaching Network is going to be on January 28th. I hope to see you there. One other cool thing that's going to happen is the call for submissions for Agile 2022 are going to go live, hopefully in the next week to 2 weeks. Please, if you have something that you want to submit to come and join us at Nashville. Yes, we are currently planning an in-person event, but we are also looking at other options about how do we bring people together as well. So there's all sorts of different things that are there as well. Also, XP is coming up. That's another thing that is very important. I would never forget that because XP is the many years that I've been going to it. I've always found that it has a unique experience. One, it's a good match where we are partnering with academia and really getting to understand some of the research and other things that are going on around Agile and Agile development, but also we've got some really great speakers that are always there. And also you can submit your proposal for that because I think the call for submissions is currently open right now, and go ahead and get something put into there. And where are we at this year? Just Copenhagen, I believe, right? Is that true? Yes, we are in Copenhagen. People put their hands up for me here. So join us in Copenhagen, which will be really great. And then, like always, I just want to wish everyone I'm looking at our stats and our numbers of over the 10,000 people who've been a part of the Agile Coaching Network this year. I want to thank you all for helping the show's success. We've had over 120,000 replays in our podcast library. I would like that up higher. That's part of the reason why I put it up on Spotify, because Spotify has been one of those avenues that have been opening it up to different things. You can play the podcast on many different platforms, from Apple to Google to even asking, and I won't say my connected device's name because it will answer me at this time and then suddenly start playing the Agile Coaching Network. We don't want to do that, but you can even ask it there. And with that, I want you to have a Merry Holidays, and I hope to see you in January. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.